special edition series, we go further than ever before to showcase the playbook which has changed software sales. The legacy of John McMahon and the 33 CxOs transcends their individual success. In this series, we explore the most exciting and dynamic leaders that are shaping the future of our industry. These leaders have all worked directly with John or the 33 and are keeping the torch burning brighter than ever. They have learned the playbook and building their own legacy. In this unique series, we consider the concepts which allow for the playbook to thrive in the modern world.
Welcome to Hunters and Unicorns. I'm Simon Kutis and I'm joined by my co-host Ollie Kune.
Hey everyone.
And we're absolutely delighted to welcome Luke Rogers. Luke, welcome.
Guys, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show, Luke.
Welcome to the show, Luke. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. In the way of an introduction, Luke, you're currently global sales leader at one of the most disruptive and high potential startups, a company called Instabase. Congratulations, first of all, because I know it's a recent appointment, but just tell us a little bit about your role there and a little bit about the company.
Yeah, no worries. I joined the company 3 months ago as VP Sales, and my job really is to grow the go-to-market organization, set the board strategy for the way we do that, and be the ultimate architect of how we get the company to market. I think what's really exciting, because most people will understand what it takes to grow a sales organization. We can get into the details of that. Is why this company. And I don't know if that's somewhere you want to go right now, but I can certainly share some thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it would be good for us if you could just tell us a little bit about what Instabase is, and what it is, and what kind of impact you think it can have in the world.
Yeah, I think if I start with the end in mind, right, the vision for Instabase is to make computers work for people. What does that mean? That doesn't really mean anything to anyone right now, but think about this. You guys have both got smartphones, I assume.
Yeah.
And you want to do something like you want to order pizza. What do?
Deliveroo.
Deliveroo, bang. And what is Deliveroo?
An app.
It's an app, right? And so since the advent of smartphones, pretty much every type of thing that we need, we now conceptually think about it as an app, right? Like we want to order a taxi, we go to Uber, right? We want to order some pizza, you go to Deliveroo. You want to do your online banking, you go to your online banking app. Now, in the world of enterprise, in a company, in a large bank or insurance company or retailer, that same sort of app store model doesn't exist. Why not?
Because no one's created it yet.
And enter Instabase, right? So if you think about, very few companies have fundamentally ever changed the whole industry. And everyone that's looking to do what I've just done is join a generational disruptive company. And I spent 9 months searching for it. But the products that have had the biggest impact in the world, they're all operating systems. Think about it. They're Windows on desktop, right, or Mac OS, or it's iOS or Android or mobile. Those operating systems have changed the way that we work with computers and the way that we fundamentally do, business, or the way that we go about our personal lives. And if the PC revolution brought us desktop computers that were equipped with word processors that ran on Windows, or calendars or spreadsheets that we could now all of a sudden do things, then the smartphone revolution came, and all of that was not just having it in one beautiful form factor that sat in our pocket, but this app store that everything became an app. Desktop computing never made that leap. We're all still using desktop operating systems like Windows or Mac OS, right? And they're all still fundamentally the same as they were 10 years ago. You have to get armies of developers to create highly bespoke software for really complex business processes like trading systems or warehouse management. All of these things are typically written in endlessly complicated, massive programs that are, many lines of code with huge software development teams. Nobody has given these organizations the ability to deliver an app store-like experience to their employees. But what if a bank could build an app that could automatically verify customer income in a fraction of a second? that's what Instabase has been able to do.
I mean, it's a fantastic. We've done some research into the company. It's truly remarkable, and the potential is astounding. It's just the sky and the universe is the limit in terms of just how disruptive it can be if it gets anywhere near, the potential of what we're speaking about. And it's very exciting. And you are a very exciting appointment, Luke. I am actually going to state a very obvious fact, and that's you're still in your tender years. You're just 33 years old, Luke.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a discredit, because we're going to find out a lot about what a remarkable career you've had, which has enabled you to really get to this point at such a staggering age. And I think it's an absolutely incredible journey and a great story, and really looking forward to kind of going through that. Now, normally we would start at the beginning, but actually we're not going to do that, Luke, because the early part of your career, there's a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, and you did some remarkable things at a young age. But I want to talk about that a bit later on when we start talking about ICE criteria, because I think your journey really epitomizes that. And so I kind of want to go a little bit further forward and get to where it really started to become very interesting, where you started to apply a lot of what you had kind of had early on, a lot of that potential, and that's AppDynamics. So do you want to just tell us a little bit about how important was AppDynamics for you?
Well, firstly, thank you for the kind words. Secondly, I don't feel like I deserve the support you just gave me. I really have to give that thanks to all the people that took an interest in my development along the way for why I am where I am today. And a lot of the way I'll answer this question is to talk about those people. I was 25 years old. I was trying to leave IBM for the second time in 2013. I'd gotten so bored that I'd set up a company while I was there, which they then told me I had to shut down or they'd sue me. So I was pretty confident that was no longer the right environment for me. So then I started the search, and you guys are in the recruitment game, and I worked in software sales recruitment for a while too. And it's hard. It's really hard to pick a great company, right? Especially when you've never done it before, you don't know what you're looking at, and you don't know who you're looking for. And I didn't really know how to set my criteria at the time. And so I really just went on instinct, to be honest. And I partnered with a recruiter that I actually, funnily enough, used to work for. And she would send me all of these different companies and say, hey, this is really hot. And I'm like, okay, great. And then all of a sudden she sent me this one company one day, and she said, this company called AppDynamics, you should really check it out. Okay, what's so special about this? Well, they just appointed Jeremy Duggan as the VP of EMEA. And funnily enough, all I could think about was all of the stories of all of the horrible things that this person had apparently done to people in his life. And the people that I'd met along my way so far, who basically would tell me never to ever meet him, go anywhere near him. He's the worst thing that will ever happen to you. And all I wanted to do was meet him. And so I drove out to this hotel that he would meet at. And I remember it very clearly, the snowy day out in Surrey, and pulled up, and there he was. And I remember this distinct feeling of, I finally found the kind of person that I need to be around. And this thought went through my head of all these things that people had said to me, don't go and meet him, was that if you were somebody that wanted to coast through life and have an easy life and just wanted to be mediocre, he would be the worst thing to ever happen to you. And then I thought, these are the people that have been telling me these things. And then I thought to myself, but if you want to make something of yourself, if you want to work hard, you want to put a bit of blood, sweat, and tears into something and achieve your potential, this is it. This is the guy. And so that was it, guys. Like, I remember this just moment. And then I went skiing for a week and I just didn't stop thinking about it for a whole week. And I was like, I just want to do this. I just want to go and jump off a cliff with this guy and give it a go. And I just put everything into getting that job.
Brilliant. And there's always interesting stories. And I know that Jeremy and a few of the others have got some interesting interview techniques. That interview itself, is there anything you can tell us about it?
Oh my God. Oh, well, I'll never forget it. So different hotel in Surrey, but a week later, and I get there and I've done my prep and I've got my, all my research in my binder and I'm fully suited up and ready to go. All my questions. I get there and I say, hey, would you like a copy of my CV? He goes, yes, thanks. I give him a copy of my CV. He sits there and he looks at it and he leans back and he looks at me and he looks at it and he looks at me again and says, why the fuck would I ever hire you? And I said, well, what are you looking for? He said, good question. And he told me intelligence, character, coachability, and experience. And I said, okay, well, would you like me to spend the next 45 minutes explaining why I've got all of those things? He said, yes. I said, well, what do you mean by intelligence? And I systematically qualified everything down to the furthest possible point that I could distill it to. And then every time I'd say, okay, so part of intelligence is IQ, and you look for academic track record, you look for pursuits outside of work, you look for this and you look for this. Have I satisfied that criteria? Yes. Can I move on? Yes. And I just went through it like a business meeting. And by the end of it, I said, I really want this job. Can I have it? And he said, yes.
Brilliant. Brilliant. And wait, how did you prepare for that interview? How did you know that that was the way it was going to go? Or was that just through your own research, looking at, information online?
The recruiter that I was working with had known him a while, and he thought that she'd coached me quite extensively for that meeting. Yep. And she'd give me advice, but what she said was run it like a business meeting.
Right.
And so that's what I did. Like, if you're going to go into a business meeting with a CIO, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to set an agenda and you're going to ask them if there's anything not on the agenda that they want to cover and what they are looking to get out of the meeting. And if you give them that, then what would that mean? Yep. And I just wanted to be, as indicative of, like, experience didn't matter. There I was, I'd been 5 years in 2 massive tech companies. I knew I was the antithesis of what he was looking for. So I just needed to prove to him that experience was irrelevant, right? And that I also wasn't taking anything for granted.
Why were you the antithesis to what he was looking for?
From everything that I'd heard, Jeremy was looking for A-player software sales guys. I'd never sold software in my life. I'd been a graduate at Cisco selling hardware, and then I've been selling IBM Global Services for a year and a half. And even like the kind of university I went to a good university, but I didn't go to a top 20 university. Grew up in the north. I didn't play a lot of competitive sports because I was not the right let's say body type for that growing up as a kid. And so all of these things that I'd heard about, he looks for people that have been the captain of the football team, that went to Oxbridge, or that went to top universities and got top degrees, and that they're like elite, massive 200% plus earners in software. Like, he was building out his initial 3 hires for AppDynamics. Like, these were big hires for him. I thought he wanted those kind of people.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because when you look at the ICE criteria, actually the E part, which is the experience part, is further down the list for a reason. And perhaps you didn't have the experience, but I think you are doing yourself a bit of a discredit, because when we go into the previous, into what you were doing at 15 and beyond, I think there's definitely a lot to kind of reinforce that character. So we're obviously going to go into that in a bit more detail. But so you joined in 2013. How did you do in your first 2 years?
Well, again, I was very lucky to work for him directly. And I remember the feeling of turning up to this Bracknell office with no windows and exercise balls to sit on and a couple of bean bags in the corner, and his office was just full of t-shirts. And I remember speaking to one of the guys who'd been there originally. He was kind of like the first sales rep before Jeremy, and said to him, how can I be successful here? And he was, you just need to do 3-year deals. We've just been doing 1-year deals. Just do 3-year deals, should be fine. TCV comp plan. I was like, that doesn't sound like that's all there is to it. Anyway, then I had my one-to-one with Jeremy, and he started to explain this sales process that, he'd put into practice at Blade Logic and then at BMC and Essential Software. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm just going to leave all my bags at the door, because all these stories I've heard of all these reps just in the last 45 minutes making $1 million a year. If I just need to do that, which I have no idea how to do that right now, but if that's what I need to do, I'm just going to do that and not do anything other than that. I'm just going to follow his process exactly. And so I just made a commitment in that moment that all I was going to do was just be like a zealot disciple of this process, learn it better than anyone else, live it more than anyone else. And as a result of that, and not giving up, my first 2 years were pretty good. I did 224% of my quota the first year, and then the second year I did 270%, and both years I did the biggest deal worldwide.
So just tell us.
I was going to say, how steep a learning curve was that? What did you have to put in to be able to learn that playbook?
Everything, mate. I mean, that was one of the toughest years of my life. Like I gave everything to that. But I've always believed in life people should be given the opportunity for reinvention, and we can talk about that a little bit more if you like when we go kind of through my story. But I don't think anyone needs to be the person that they are today forever. Everyone should have the opportunity to be able to change. And I decided when I was joining AppDynamics that was going to be another big moment of change in my life. I went through a lot of changes with my friends. I changed my diet. I changed my exercise regime. I think I just changed a lot. My mindset, like I'd gone from, a place of just kind of coasting around in IBM with these people that didn't really want to work very hard to, an environment where I looked around and everyone was just running as fast as they possibly could. And I knew I needed to train. But the days were long, and it was just a do whatever it takes kind of mentality. If I needed to be on a plane at 4:00 in the morning, I would do it. I did multiple day trips to San Francisco. I did multiple day trips to Johannesburg. I did multiple day trips to New York. And it was, I remember one day running a Tough Mudder race, being covered in shit, and then getting on the plane to New York in economy, going to present to the CIO of UBS, and then coming back again, and not taking my wallet because I'd left it in my car. So having to, just like my mind was spinning, but I just knew that if I followed this process and I just kept going, and I just kept pipeline generating, and I just kept champion building, and I just kept doing more and more POVs and meeting more and more economic buyers, it would happen. And when it started to happen, then it became addictive, because I was like, the formula works. So I'm just going to keep putting more into the top.
Why did you believe it before you'd actually experienced it?
I had no reason not to. There was no upside in my mind to fighting it or approaching it with any form of skepticism. Right, here's this guy that's done, PTC, Essential, Blade, BMC, right, all $1 billion plus exits, like just an absolute legendary track record of success, with leaving behind a legacy of hugely successful salespeople. Why would I ever come in and doubt it? What's the upside of that?
Incredible, absolutely incredible. Because 1,000, I read in your profile and previously what we spoke about, conducted 1,000 customer meetings, and won over 64 net new logo enterprise deals was it in 2 years, or was that in a year?
It was in 2 years, yeah. So we because we were very metrics driven, right? We would look at number of new business meetings, number of closed new logos, number of, POVs. We had all that data going back all the way to the beginning. And, when you look back at it like that, and you're like, wow, 1,000 new business meetings in 2 years. That's quite a lot, actually.
It's insane. Absolutely insane. It's the numbers.
What was amazing was there was such high quality standards to them as well, right? We would all be very accountable to what was a new business meeting, what wasn't. And we would really, really hold ourselves to that standard of not calling a coffee, at lunchtime with a prospect, a new business meeting, because if we weren't turning up with a value pyramid, if we weren't turning up with a tailored demo, and we weren't turning up having done a discovery call, then it wasn't a new business meeting. So, it was just amazing. But he was there. He went to so many meetings. I remember meeting him at 7:00 in the morning at Costa in Liverpool Street, just ready to go into UBS at yet another ungodly hour of the day. And I think that's what great sales leadership is when managers are with you in the trenches.
So tell us a little bit about the playbook that was kind of enforced there. Tell us a little bit about some of the different elements that Jeremy and the team were kind of rolling out.
Yeah, so enforced is obviously a way of putting it, and certainly as you become a leader and you try and take this playbook and you make it your own. Inspire is certainly what we strive for, right? We try and inspire the playbook. I think definitely in today's climate as well, it's really important that people buy into things. I just don't think these environments of compliance are really, around anymore. But really what it was believing that A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F equaled $1 million paycheck, right? And knowing that, like, obviously $1 million paycheck means different things to different people, right? Like for me at the time, all I cared about was buying a Tesla, right? And that's what I did. Like I bought a Tesla. It was the first shipment off the boat. It was like one of the first Teslas in the UK. And I was like, yes, I did it. I've made it. And then it was like, buy a flat, right? And everyone's kind of got a why at the time. And then it became pay for an expensive wedding, which was also wonderful. But it was just about understanding that every time you did a new business meeting, there's a conversion rate that you could expect. There was a percentage rate you could expect. So if I did 10 new business meetings, I would expect that 6 of those would turn into potential opportunities. And those 6 opportunities, I would do technical deep dives in. And of those, I would qualify out, and I would be left with 4. And those 4, I would take to do proof of values in, right? And 2 of them would be urgent because the pain would be strong now, and 2 of them would be less urgent. So I would nurture those, and then that would give me a pipeline so that I could have 2 commit deals the next quarter and 2 upside deals that same quarter. And those 2 upside deals would then make up my following quarter. So what the playbook really enabled us to do was run a business based on leading indicators that enabled us to know, based on where we were today, where we would actually finish 9 months from now. And so no longer were we chasing revenue. Revenue just became the byproduct of all the stuff that we were doing today. And we knew that if we kept doing the things that we needed to do today, the new business meetings, the POVs, the technical deep dives, all of the leading indicators, we would be wildly successful. And we could reverse engineer that maths into the stuff that we needed to get up and do every day.
It's interesting that you say that obviously you wanted to completely master that. Everything that Jeremy and the sales leadership around you were obviously inspiring. So the first 2 years, obviously you made President's Club with those remarkable numbers, but then 2015, 2017, your following 2 years, you were actually globally the #1 sales rep, hitting 462% of your number, which is just staggering.
Well, so technically, no, I had the #1 worldwide sales rep in my team. So
okay.
Those 2 years I'd been promoted as a first line manager, which again, terrifying experience, especially when some of those people, are twice your age. And there's many stories I can tell about that. But what I'm most proud of is their achievements, right? Of having the world number one field sales rep do 462%, and having also another rep do 345%, right, and be the number one in EMEA, and then having another rep on 130%, and all while building the team out. And I think that for me was a huge achievement, because we were kind of splitting and scaling the business, all the time, right? So the people were moving out of my team into my team. I was hiring new people, but to do that, I was really proud of them, because it was what they did and got me where I am.
So why were they so successful, Luke? Was it just because you empowered them and got them to be as kind of, detailed around what needed to be done and followed in your footsteps, really?
It was a massive team effort, is the first thing I'll say, right? So there are other people that came into the business, like Steve McCluskey, who also was Blade and BMC, and Steve came in and he became my boss as a VP for Northern Europe. And I think, I hope this never changes, but sales is a team sport, right? And you've got to put the right team on the field to win the deals. And so I'll never take any of the credit for what they've done. But what I think I did for them was help them also always make sure they had the right people in the deals, right? Whether it was Jeremy or Steve or me, or all three of us, all owning different champions in the campaigns, right? So when we talk about those kinds of numbers, our average sales price as a company was around $1 million. And some of those deals we did were in the 8, 9, 10, 11, $12 million range. So to get those kinds of size deals done, we really needed a huge effort from lots of different people, and a strategy and a plan. And I studied game theory at university alongside, a lot of other things, but, I've always been very interested in, okay, here's where we are today, but like if we want to be here, 3 weeks from now, what are all the moves that go into that, right? And we would spend a lot of time trying to reverse engineer our way into where we want to get to or what we need to do. And it was just a lot of communication and strategy and team-based sports, and not all chasing the ball right in injury time, which is what some sales teams do, unfortunately.
Did you hire that team, or was that an inherited team?
It was a mix. So about 50% of the team was people that I'd hired, and about 50% of the team were people I inherited.
So you went from no software sales experience to, within 2 years, being promoted to be leading and managing teams that were closing upwards of $10 million deals.
Yeah.
Wow. It's profound in itself, the fact that, not only were you kind of mastering it yourself, but you were able to kind of pass that on. What is it that you think enabled you to make that transition?
People believing in me, right? I remember being in the corridor of a client in the middle of conducting a series of value interviews and getting the call from Steve saying, "I'm considering you for the regional director job." And I just went silent, because he'd since hired a bunch of people from BMC that had already been part of his team, some of whom had been first-line managers. And I just never, ever expected him to take, to look at me and consider me for that role, like when they were such an obvious and safe choice. And I asked him, I said, well, why me? He said, well, because it's a meritocracy and you're the top performer. I said, well, I don't know if they'd work for me. And he said, well, they don't have a choice, and you're the best there is. So if they don't think they can learn anything from you, then they're the idiots. And I just was so struck by the level of confidence and support that he had in me as, at the time, 27-year-old, sitting there thinking, wow, like what a responsibility to lead the first team, to be the first person other than them responsible for recruiting new talent into the UK. And it was, thanks to Jeremy and Steve's belief in me that they put me in that position, and then they continued to support me through it.
Wow. And at as you said, 27, probably hiring men and women older than you. How was that as a you know, how did you get those individuals to believe into you and buy into you? Did they all buy into you?
Well, no, obviously not everyone buys into everyone, right? And yeah, thank goodness for that. I would say it was a painful journey, Ollie. You know, I'm sure when you guys started out for the first time, you know that you've all hired bunches of people as well, I'm sure, and not everyone works out. But Jeremy was very honest with me. So when you start doing this, you're gonna have to kiss a lot of frogs,
Right?
And that's part of it, right? You've got to learn. You've got to learn what you don't like, and you've got to learn what you like, and you've got to learn, you know, who's lying to you and who's not. But you know, I was always counseled to just be myself, right? And that's kind of really all I've ever known how to be. And when I would share my story and people would understand that, that's when people would buy into me, because they would understand like what I was about. Because it's, you know, it's one thing to say, look, I've been the sales rep at this company for 2 years, and, you know, everyone's making good money here and the product's hot, the market's hot, right? But that actually attracts, in some ways, the wrong type of people.
Yeah.
It attracts people looking for an easy paycheck, right? Yeah. Not highly intelligent, high character people. And so you really got to work to try and find those special, unique, entrepreneurial people. And for me, that wasn't actually, in the end, it was when I met them, it wasn't difficult. There was just that aha moment. I remember meeting Natalie Sidwell for the first time, who she was working at a finance company selling financial products to the Central European market. And again, just like me, like no one would classically consider her, but her story, her background, just her was so special. Everything about her was so special. I remember it was, I think it was St. Patrick's Day. And I called Jeremy. I said, if you don't hire her, I'm going to be so mad. I'm going to quit. And he was like, you're not going to quit, but I'll speak to her. And she was the first person that I hired, and the first woman into the team, and just has gone on to do exceptional things herself. But it takes a lot of work, and you've just got to be yourself.
Jeremy talks a lot about the 3 R's, right? Recruitment, revenue, and retention. How much training did you have in order for you to be able to kind of execute your own kind of playbook? You're obviously now no longer thinking about yourself. You're obviously thinking about building your business. So how much training was there, and what did that training look like?
It was a lot of training. You know, when you're a rep and it's a very much a startup environment of, you know, Jeremy's your first line manager, then it was just a lot of on the job training, right? There was no big sophisticated sales enablement organizations or anything like that then. But then when we got into a point of scaling out the management team, we would always do quarterly management offsites, which would always be, you know, 2-day events where it would be a lot of training. I remember going and sitting in a hotel room in Amsterdam with him and Steve and a couple of the new managers that had started in Germany, and they kind of downloaded the whole playbook on us. And I remember sitting there going, okay, then great. And then, you know, then there was the next quarter, all the worldwide managers came to London, and there was a big pile of resumes. So like, you know, John McMahon talked about this in his podcast with you guys of, you know, getting people to go through the resumes. The awkward part of that story was that my resume was anonymized and put in that pile. and the majority of people said no to it.
Oh, really?
And so it served as a great example, right, at the time of what not to look for in a resume, right, and not to just look for experience, which is what a lot of managers were doing. But full credit to them. They put a huge amount of effort into every quarter training, and you know, for me, I've taken that and I continue to do that, you know, on a monthly basis. I think that growth and training and enablement and development is what really, really great reps and leaders that come into sales organizations, what they look for. They want to just get better, right? They want to be masters of their craft. And the training I had there was world-class.
Tell us a little bit about your mindset, right? Because you don't just wake up one minute. I know you've spoken a little bit about the focus and wanting to have some nice shiny things, but there's no way that that's the end of it. So how do you get yourself ready? How do you focus? What are your mantras? Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. I thought Ollie was going to be the one with the brown leather couch here.
Taken my question, to be honest.
You've beaten Ollie to the punch, and you're starting to get deep. That's good. I get deep with you guys, and no problem. Yeah, it's never been about the shiny things. Look, I grew up single mother. Dad was in jail. Right. It was pretty basic. You know, my mom worked days and nights as a nurse. You know, I'd kind of see her when I could see her, and I remember looking at her and just thinking, wow, like as early as I can remember, just like you are either asleep or working, right? And you're doing it just to put food on the table. And I remember, you know, later in my life kind of speaking to my dad as I think it was about like 9 or 10 or something. And he takes me out on a trip one weekend. And I remember saying to him, or he asked me the question, he said, what do you want to be when you're older? I said, you know, I really want to be a businessman. I don't ask me why I kind of came to that conclusion at that age, but I did. And I remember him turning around and saying, you're not smart enough or tough enough to be a businessman. What else do you want to be? And that's it. Like that, you know, unfortunately it's a little negative, but I remember that moment, and I will remember that moment forever. And it just has caused me to live a life of, I'm just going to do whatever I put my mind to. And maybe it doesn't work out, but fuck it. Like, I'm going to give it a shot, because what's the worst that can happen? Because no one can tell me what I can't be, and no one can tell me what I can't do. And I want everyone around me to think that as well. And it comes from there. Like, and you know, I'm married now. I've got a little kid. I take a lot of, you know, my strength and my energy from my wife and my daughter. But I think from a professional context, I get up every day excited to teach my team how to realize their potential. I have so much respect in this world for school teachers. I think it's one of the most underpaid but most important professions in the world. And you think about what they're doing. They're taking our children and they're teaching them to be better human beings for the future. And like, what more noble profession than that? And I would like to do my small part there, right? And so I look back and I think there was a guy in my life that told me I couldn't do something, and I showed him. And then there was a guy in my life in Jeremy that took a chance on me, and I felt like I owed him to make the most of that chance. And I feel like I made good on that. And now it's my turn to find people like me and help them, because that's how we make the world a better place.
Such an incredible thought process.
I was going to say, did you have any siblings? Did you have any brothers or sisters, or were you having to be the man? Were you the man of the house?
Yeah, I was. And then my mum remarried when I was 11, 12. And then I actually left home when I was 15.
You left home?
Yeah. Yeah. So my, you know, all amicable, but mum remarried, nice bloke. They had a couple of kids. I, you know, just kind of drifted away from the family, and I developed a bit of an obsession with computers. So not only did I end up weighing about 17 stone and living in the attic, playing around with my computers, having a fairly traumatic time of school, but I, you know, just kind of separated myself away from the family and just kind of went into my own space.
Incredible.
But you're a child. You're 15.
Yeah. But you know, like think back to, you know, times when, you know, people lived on farms, right? And you know, we didn't have all of what we have today. Like, you know, 15 was, people were sending 15-year-old kids into battle in the Middle Ages, right? It was just, you know, think about all the young kids that went off to war, right? You just got to grow up when you've got to grow up. And I always had older friends. And like I said, there was never any breakdown in relationship. I just naturally drifted away from the family, and then I'd set up a company, and I was making so much money through that at that age that I could afford to pay the rent on the house.
Insane. I think it's probably a good time to step into that point, right? So, you know, looking back on there, and I think we will come back to AppDynamics, but in So tell us a little bit more about the business that you set up here, Luke. And so it was a business where you fix computers and
Yeah, I mean, let's just call it out what it was. Like, I was 13. My mum paid enough money to send me off on a computer course with a bunch of 50-year-old blokes. I learned how to completely build a computer from scratch. Deploy the operating system, fix it. I got down to all the low-level information that I would need in order to essentially fix any Windows computer. And so I stopped having to pay to get my own fixed, which is really her motivations for sending me on that course. But then that turned into is like just bit by bit, people in the community started to realize, oh, there's this kid, he can fix computers. So there I was skating around the neighborhood on my skateboard, going around charging £50 an hour and just sitting, having a cup of tea with a mum who didn't know how to use Internet Explorer, right? Or downloaded way too much spyware or malware. And, before I knew it, like the business was just turning over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds a week and thousands a month. And then I got into the business of selling PCs that I would build. So I was doing a weekend job at Comet, for those of you who remember that, right? I was working in the PC section and I realized, hang on a minute, these things are really expensive and not very good. And I can build this same thing here for 150 quid less. And so that's what I started doing. And then I set up a website back in, 2001, and started an e-commerce business where people could can configure and buy their computers online. And then they could buy them with like home care packages that I would service. There's a couple of guys at school that would like work with me to go out and do some of the calls. If people needed you to come out to the house, I go out and set up Wi-Fi networks for people. I'd set up, small offices for people. I'd do out of hours. So I'd get home from school and then I had this dedicated phone line in my bedroom that rang from 6 p.m. till 6 a.m. and anyone could call it. And it was a premium rate line. And then I'd come out for £150 an hour. So I'd just get out of bed and get in my car and go somewhere. And I learned web design. So I started building websites for people. And eventually it was turning over close to £250,000 a year. And then I became ready to go to university and had to make a decision.
At 15 days, at 15, back in 2001, that is absolutely incredible, Luke.
Thanks.
And again, making huge sacrifices, right?
Just to bring a bit of context here, because Ollie and I, when we were kind of looking at your background, Luke, people, I don't know whether you realise, this is the time when we were, pissing our parents off because it's 56K, dial-up modems. And, it wasn't as, computers and stuff wasn't as prominent. We just about had mobile phones. This was just at the beginning of this. So it's really, really entrepreneurial because it was so ahead of probably what a lot of other 15-year-olds were even thinking about at that time.
Yeah,
it was a lot about survival as well, though, right? Like, if you want to go out on your own and you needed to make money, I was making £5 a week mowing a lawn. I was making, £3.50 a week doing a paper round. I was like, hang on a minute, I can make £50 an hour doing this. Great. I can get out of home. Great. I can buy a car. Great. My parents didn't have a lot, so it wasn't really a choice in my mind.
Wow. So so at that point in 2006, was that after you graduated in 2008, didn't you?
Yeah.
Graduated in 2008. So you started a job at Sonics Communications in 2006. So you were working part-time, full-time whilst at university?
Part-time, yeah. That was I was the usual. I had a bar job at university, I was trying, that was a retail sales job and, selling computers and TVs and things like that for a Sony distributor. It was whatever I could, scrape together. But I ended up becoming the president of the snow sports club at university, which actually sort of dominated a huge amount of my time because we had a mission to grow that thing. So it was everything was just a part-time job at university while I was studying.
Incredible.
Why did you want to go to university? You know, a lot of people in your position would have just stuck to it and thought, I can do something. What was it that pulled you to university at that point?
And no offense to any of your listeners from Bolton, but have you ever been to Bolton?
I haven't, no. That probably says a lot.
Yeah, no, it was, you know, I always knew there was a big world out there, right? And that unfortunately, like, you know, you grow up in the North, you realize everyone in the North hates everyone in the South, and you're like, why? And then you kind of realize it's like, oh, okay, because there's more down there, right? And so I was kind of really a point of, well, do I just stay here and this is kind of what I do and this is what I am forever? And I don't know, I wasn't particularly conscious of it, but I'd already started to develop a fascination with companies like Microsoft through doing that, right? It was like starting to really understand the power of a company like Microsoft or the power of a company like Google, as they were just starting out, Google at the time. But I was already starting to get really interested in like the economics of the web, and the dot-com crash had just happened. And I was like, why did all of this happen? And I was really young, so it didn't all make a lot of sense, but I started to learn about the stock market, and I was like, I just need to get closer to that, right? Because I'm not going to be anywhere close to it if I stay here and do what I'm doing. And I always knew, like, going to university, getting a degree was kind of part of the rite of passage. It was sort of the expectation that my mum had set with me. And I was like, you know, if you can, please go, you know, work towards university. And then I started to develop a real interest in robotics through my last year of school. So I went to a sixth form college and I studied automation there. And when I was starting to think about what I wanted to study, I really gravitated towards the field of artificial intelligence, and I really gravitated towards the field of robotics. So the degree I studied was a Bachelor's of Science in artificial intelligence and cybernetics with Mandarin Chinese on the side.
Sorry to laugh at that, but you're studying what is quite complex degrees there, and you're going to throw Mandarin in the side. That's just, again, incredible, Luke. Absolutely incredible.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Sorry, Luke, Simon.
No, I was just going to say, and then obviously, fresh out of university, why sales?
Well, first of all, he recruitment. He was
So that was another university job, right? So right. Yeah, there I am, right? Like, my first time in an office, I put my tie on, and I'm in my final year, and was super excited. I got a job as a resourcer on Thames Valley Park in Reading, and I'm running down there, and what are they doing? And it's software sales recruitment, right? And it's this little office, and it was definitely the little boiler room, and I have my whiteboard behind me, and annoyingly, I told my housemate about this job that I'd got that was paying really good money, and he went and applied, and he also got a job as a resourcer, and they sat him opposite me, and he was like, I liked this guy, but he was kind of like my rival a little bit. Like, we were very similar. And so we would sit opposite each other every day, just grinding the phone, looking for great candidates. Like, you know, every time we booked one in with one of the senior recruiters, it was another point on the board, and every day, all day. And I remember being like so sick one day because I come back from Glastonbury, and they were like, you know, you haven't come to work for 2 days, you're out. And so I just, that next day, just dragged myself out of bed, like white as a sheet, and just put my tie on, went and sat in my seat, and just called until the MD came in at like 7:00 at night. It was like, you can have your job back. But long story short was, I looked at the world of software sales, and I thought, these guys are making bank. Like, that is good times, right? And unfortunately, a lot of the people that I met as I was booking them in to see these recruiters, I didn't think they were very good. And so I just thought, oh, well, that's got to be what I've got to go do, right? Like, I haven't seen any other job. Like, some of the most highly paid PhD qualified engineers that were coming out of my degree program were getting a third to a quarter of what these guys were making.
Yeah.
Was it just the money?
No, but in a way, when you're that young and, you know, you're 20 years old, it's like what you earn straight out of university is kind of a validation of, okay, I've made it. I think the other big appeal for it was it kept me immersed in technology. Like one of the things you can do when you're in technology sales is you can kind of nerd out a bit on the subject matter, and that mattered to me. It was 2008 when I graduated as well. It was a pretty tragic time in the world, and I'm sure you guys remember. And there weren't a lot of jobs flying around, right? So I applied to all the big graduate schemes: Google, Microsoft, IBM, Cisco, HP, because I thought, right, a corporate coaching graduate program can really give me some great grounding here. It's a safe environment. They're going to invest in my learning and my development, and I'll learn the ropes about what it means to do enterprise sales. And of all the programs, actually, Cisco's program was based in Amsterdam, and the way it was advertised was, you come in here, we'll train you for 9 months, we'll invest over 300,000 euros in you, and then we'll put you straight in the field after your program. And no one else was offering that. Like, I got the job at Google, but that was to go in, basically be, an SDR, an account manager in Dublin, with training on the side and work your way up. So Cisco became the obvious choice. Plus, living in Amsterdam straight out of university didn't hurt.
No, I can imagine. So quickly moved up the ranks at Cisco, inside account manager, then became product sales specialist for data center and virtualization, which was a total career of about 3.5 years at Cisco. Then IBM for 1.5 years.
Yeah. So, again, what I hope with this podcast is that anyone that's listening to it will avoid making the mistakes that I have made, and hopefully take, any of what I've said and put it to some use. So I just worked hard at Cisco, and, it's not that exciting, right? It just, moved up through the team. I gravitated towards software because I saw that's where people were actually making good money. And that's why I ended up in the virtualization thing, because I saw VMware, and VMware was the thing. It was just starting to become popular. Virtualization had just really, come into the world around 2010. And that's what that team was doing. It was selling products that sat around VMware's portfolio. But I remember I was stuck on a graduate pay band pretty much my whole time there at Cisco, even though I consistently got the number one performance. And I was probably way too arrogant about it looking back, right? I did not treat my boss with the kind of respect that I probably should have done. And, anyone that's earlier in their career, I hope, they don't make that same mistake. And therefore he wasn't my champion, even though I was his top performer. And so I just basically kept getting looked over from promotions. And then I tried to apply for the voluntary redundancy, and they wouldn't let me take it. And so I went to a mentor of mine there that I found. I said, what do I do? He said, you've got to leave. And if you want to stay at Cisco, you've got to leave, and you've got to come back again. So go and, get what you're worth somewhere else, and then figure it out from there. And so that's exactly what I did. And IBM were the highest bidder.
Wow.
So obviously IBM, again, we are talking about some consistent, really, really good achievements. How were you able to kind of maintain that performance, constantly throughout your entire career?
That's a really good and difficult question, right? I think I can very easily trace that back to my time at AppDynamics, was just really doing what I was told to do, follow that process and don't quit, right? And there were so many times when I just wanted to quit so badly. And my wife was, or my girlfriend at the time was like, just leave, like you're miserable, like just get out of there, right? Or there was other job offers that were being dangled in front of me. And I think one thing to just trust in a process and do it, right? If somebody says A plus B plus C plus D plus E plus F equals success, then don't skip C, right? Don't do F your way. Do it the way you've been taught. And when you're doing it, no matter how hard it gets, don't quit, right? Like if I think about the things that I've been able to do, it's really just been as simple as that, guys. Like just keep going, right? Just keep swimming, to quote Dory, from Finding Nemo. And
you can tell
and
you've
just
got kids, Luke.
that came from working weekend jobs at Comet, actually, with Finding Nemo on repeat every day. But that's it, guys. Like, I just feel like a big part of the reason is because I didn't give up. And in the end, it worked out, right? Whether it was because I ended up getting to work on an account that somebody else wasn't doing a good job of, that I would have had no idea that somebody would have given me that chance. But because I didn't quit, and because I knew people knew I could be depended on, and that I was going to be here, they would give me those chances. And I remember one of my really good friends was a colleague at AppDynamics in that those first 2 years, and he was working on an account, and my boss, Steve, called him into his office and said, I'm taking this account off you and giving it to Luke. And that account ended up being the account that did, 200+% of my number. And I didn't know that was going to happen to me, but I just kept doing what I was doing up until that point. So look, I think it's as simple as trust in the plan and the process, and don't ever give up.
Love that. What was the big difference, in your opinion, between, the biggest difference between AppDynamics, IBM, and Cisco? If you were to kind of summarize that.
People. Simple. People that want to work in environments like AppDynamics attract other people like them. And those kinds of ambitious, fearless, intelligent, coachable, humble, brilliant entrepreneurial people, they want to work with each other, right? And people that are looking for a lot of balance, and that are looking for a steady paycheck, and that are looking for minimal disruption and minimal change, they also want to work together. And that's what happens. And that's why big organizations end up with cultures like that. And actually, those big organizations are quite happy with that because they're so difficult to run at that scale. You can model an entire revenue business for a company like IBM on 70% quota achievement or less, as long as you know what you've got, right? But when you put one AppD style person in an environment like that, then it's really disruptive. And that's the situation I've been in. Those first 5 years, I look back, it was really disruptive. And it got that way towards the end of the AppDynamics journey as Cisco started to come closer and closer in after the acquisition.
Yeah. So what is it about that environment which allows people with intelligence, character, coachability to really thrive? I know you've just said to people, but there has to be more structure around that to enable that to really give it the oxygen it needs to thrive. So can you just kind of tell us a little bit about what you think the elements are that it needs for that to happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that taking the limiters off, right? If you think about, we've probably all owned cars, right? They've got rev limiters, right? Allowing people to go beyond any set definition, right? So one big mistake that big companies make is they create very rigid comp plans. So when you're looking for people to go that extra mile in sales organizations, you've got to give them a reason to do so. And if you're going to cap them at a certain percentage, right, or you're going to create a compensation arrangement that has so many constraints, then all they're going to do is they're going to spend their time trying to game that plan. But if you make it simple and you make it merit-based, and it's about the more I put in, the more I get out, then people will just thrive. They'll do their thing, right? And if you give them the right training and the right mentoring, I think people can achieve things that they didn't think they were possible of. That's what happened to me. A part of it is, as well as being very adaptable. So as a leader, I think it's really important that you aren't rigid in your plans, and knowing that when you're in a high growth, hyperscale environment like that, you've got to change. So one of the things that we did regularly in AppDynamics was, it was always that I owned the accounts in the UK, even when I had a team of 24 people. And if I had an important account with a rep who wasn't doing anything with it or wasn't doing a good enough job, I'd give them a chance. And if they then squandered that chance, that account went to somebody else. And it went there quickly, right? We wouldn't wait until the fiscal year was done, because by then you might have lost it to your competitor. And so you've got to give people the opportunity, right, to work for the reward. And that's why I truly believe in creating cultures that are a meritocracy, because if someone's going to put in the work, why wouldn't I give them somebody else's account who doesn't deserve it as much as them? So I think like leaders that are adaptable and that are willing to change and kind of go back on the plans that they make and acknowledge that perfect plan that they spent all this time presenting to the board isn't necessarily the right plan 100% of the time. Like, you've got to be able to change. You've got to be able to adapt.
So how much of that are you now taking with you to Instabase? What is it you're really, really kind of focusing on, and what from those learnings are you kind of trying to adjust and adapt and leave behind?
Yeah, so I'll start with the geeky stuff first. So, we had a little laugh over my ridiculous degree, right, Ollie? So, this obsession with science and process and mathematics and engineering is like, that's pretty hardwired in me. That's where I came from, right? So with the degree in AI and cybernetics, like the cybernetics definition is really interesting. People think cybernetics is that cyborgs. It's not. Actually, it's the science of, this is really boring, I apologize, the science of communications and automatic control systems in both machines and living things. Okay, so what does that mean? So like, there's feedback loops that exist in the world, right? Like everything kind of has a feedback loop. It has a process. It has a cycle. When we hear a noise, we might jump out of the way, right? That's like a feedback loop that's occurring in us, in humans, in living things. And so my vision here is to take all of this experience that I've got and learn along the way, the playbooks, all the endless training, and to codify every element of selling. So McMahon did it, right? Like, you guys interviewed him. He took what was it was kind of around him from the leaders that brought him in there, and he codified it in the first instance. And then the 33 CxOs that you profile, right? They then took that and then they kind of made it theirs. And what I want to do, because Jeremy had a degree in English, not in cybernetics, is to codify every element of selling into like a formula that it's so flawless that any intelligent and coachable individual, regardless of their experience, just like me, can thrive in that, where it really is like a piece of maths that they can look at and say, like, not just A through F equals success, but like, what is A and what are all the subcomponents of A that I need to do to be great, right? And do all of that in a way where I've dispelled this art into such a science that I can create this elite sales force without just having to hire, lions or anything like that. Just brilliant, determined people that can learn to take this playbook that no one has ever been able to break down to that level and build an unimaginably elite and consistent and challenging and engaging sales force who just obsess about the success of their champions. Like, the one thing that turns me off in my hiring process is when I ever meet anyone that is really just coming at this from a selfish motivation, and that's all there really is to it. I'm kind of done, because it doesn't just say to me like, all you care about is money. It also says like, that's the way you're going to treat your customers. You're going to do a deal and you're going to move on. And that's not what I want. I want people to obsess about the success of the champions that do their job for them, right? This day and age, we're not selling software. Our champions are selling software. And it's our job to make our champions successful. That's what we're doing.
How far are you down the line of building that code?
It's my work in progress for sure. I'm assembling some really bright people, around me to help me with it, and we'll be doing a lot of experimentation. And I've definitely got some modeling in mind and a technological vision for it as well, and that no more will be doing emails on a Friday night or spreadsheets on a Sunday morning. This stuff should live in systems of engagement. We can't be running out there selling some of the most sophisticated technology on the planet and being spreadsheet driven in the background.
So if you were to summarize, why should someone come and work for you at Instabase, what would you say?
I will obsess about their development. I will give them every single opportunity that I was given. I will give them every single connection to the world of venture capital that I was given. I will give them all of the training that I was given. I will hold them to the standard that I was held to. And I will make sure, I will make it my personal duty, never, ever, ever to lower the bar by only ever hiring people as good, if not better than them, so that they can continue to grow and be excellent every single day.
Oh, can I have a job? No, he's kidding. No, it's an incredible thought. And I think, it leads nicely on to kind of a bit more understanding around the Revenue Collective, which is what you've got involved with now, which is a really interesting group. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the story was, I moved to Toronto. I don't know anyone other than my wife, who's from here. We have a baby. I've left all my mates behind, and I meet up with a guy who's a friend of a friend, and we're having a beer. This is back when you could do that. And I'm like, hey, I'm new. And he's like, yeah, cool. He just moved back from London as well. And we're both sales leaders. And I said to him, this has been great. I've really appreciated the opportunity just to kind of talk about my challenges as a sales leader and the kinds of things that I'm going through. And, at that point I was running a pretty big business, $150 million business with, many, many, many people, 54 reps. And, he was running a smaller team, but we were still sharing stories that were relevant about negotiating quotas and setting comp plans and, all the things that sales leaders have to go through. And one of the things that was really obvious to me and that I learned was that actually sales leadership can be quite lonely. It's quite competitive. So when there are other sales leaders at your level, you tend not to collaborate with them inside your own company because you're kind of trying to rise above them. You also tend not to collaborate too many with your direct competition because you're recruiting the same people, right? So at the time, if I'd have gone and I did, and I met up with a couple of guys from Mongo, for example, and Snowflake, but we were all fishing in a similar talent pool, right? And so it was also a bit awkward. And we sat there, me and this guy, and we said, hey, we should set this thing up where there's a group for sales leaders and we can share all this information. And we went off and created all this stuff on WhatsApp, and then one day I just Googled it because one of the companies I'd set up once, I realized after about 3 weeks of drawing it all up that actually it just existed already. And I was like, hey, I've just found this thing called Revenue Collective. It sounds like exactly what we're talking about. And he was like, yeah, me too. I was like, should we just join that? And he's like, yeah. And so I met the Toronto chapter leader, a really nice guy, took me for lunch, a guy called Butch. And he just made me feel really welcome and told me about the meetups that they would do. And, I went to a bunch of them and I met all these local leaders in Toronto and, just got out of the house as well and got to meet people that were like-minded. They're going to tell my story. And it's just been great because, it's not complicated. It's essentially, a Slack channel with a few thousand really, really talented, brilliant sales leaders that are just there, right? And we kind of have it on in the background next to my Instabase Slack. And if I need a question answered, I'll go to the right channel and I'll ask it. And if somebody else is in there and they've got a question and I've got a bit of spare time, I'll answer it. And, we can do one-to-one networking and we have little virtual coffees, but it's just a really great way to broaden your mind, especially, when I've been raised in this very rigid McMahon, Duggan world, to just hear a little bit about how other people do it.
One of the things that you're obviously trying to champion, Luke, or try and find answers is kind of the issue of kind of diversity and parity, and that kind of thing as well. Kind of just tell us a little bit about how important that is to you, and what it is you're thinking about, and what the future for that could look like.
I think one of the things that bothered me the most when I was working at AppDynamics for those first few years is just how few women were around. There's obviously there's the obvious places that women there was a lot of women in the marketing organization, and there was a handful of women in the inside sales teams, but like in the enterprise team, there's nobody. And I was just like, what? Why are there no women in enterprise software? And I realized, not through anything that I particularly did, but just through observing other people in the teams, that it was a bit of a lads club. And having grown up as a fat kid at school and getting bullied, I just had a bit of a fundamental problem with that. And I realized that actually ICE, prioritizing recruitment experience last in the recruitment process, is a really great way of solving that problem. As long as you don't go out looking for people that are like you, and you change your search parameters. So one of the things, we stopped looking just at software companies or even at tech companies, and then found looking in finance, there were a lot more really smart women working in finance. And so that's how we met Natalie. And then we started to look at MarTech and other types of technologies and other types of careers, to just like research, sales, and other financial services organizations. So really just forgetting where they were, but you obviously need some sort of company, right, to anchor a search. You guys know this better than anybody, and it was difficult, right? But I was fortunate enough to have a few great recruiters around and work with them very closely as partners to really reestablish what we were looking for. And then it's like a flywheel. As soon as we got Natalie in the team, we started to naturally attract more women. And then by the time I was the VP of the UK, 3 out of 4 of my regional directors were all women, and over 50% of my team was women. And it just kind of happened that way, right? Because when you start breaking the diversity mold in the beginning, and you just consistently stay focused on intelligence and character and coachability, you don't have to go out and look for women or people of racial minority. None of that should come into it. Just go and look for intelligent people, but just stop fishing in the same pond. And that's all we did. And that is really important to me, because that's how people get an opportunity in life, right? If we keep fishing in the same ponds, we're going to keep hiring the same people, and we're going to end up with the same types of teams. And we're going to end up with the same types of leaders. And it's new leaders that come from those different backgrounds, that are diverse. They're the ones that are going to change things, because they'll hire different people, and then everything will change. And that's what we need to do. And that is important to me.
I think that's a really kind of important, a really important point that we're going to kind of touch on as part of the conclusion. But I suppose a couple more questions for you. In terms of, obviously you've had to invest a lot of time. We spoke a lot about sacrifice, didn't feel like sacrifices, but you've obviously had to make sacrifices along the way. Are you now getting to kind of have any of that time back? What do you do in your spare time? Do you get any spare time? What can you tell us about Luke outside of work?
Oh man, love to get out on my bike. So I was listening to the McMahon podcast yesterday while careering around the ravines of Toronto. So love to mountain bike. And when I was in the UK, I would be out in Wales or the Surrey Hills. Love to do that, get muddy and just get a little bit afraid, right? Like anything I can do that makes me a little bit afraid, like skydiving and, rock climbing, like anything that's a little bit just dangerous and a little bit nerve wracking. I love to do stuff like that. I would love to travel. Been very fortunate to see a lot of countries in the world already. I obviously not traveling right now, but my little girl who's 14 months has really changed everything. And when I first moved to Toronto, I did the usual North American sales leader thing of just being on a plane every day, right? And so my little girl was born, and there I was off for 3 days a week most weeks, and thankfully, come Christmas, and then COVID, to put a stop to that, and it's really given me time to reflect on the fact that actually one of my most important drivers is to be a great dad and be a great husband. And now I'm able to live this life where I have very strict control over my schedule. I put my little girl to bed in the morning. I give her breakfast. I pick her up in the morning. Sometimes we go to the park. And then at 6 o'clock Eastern time, no matter all the stuff on the West Coast that needs to get done, I stop. And we have dinner. We go for walks. We go to the park. We do whatever, and then the weekends are all about her. So I feel very much in control of my day now. From 9 till 6 is work time, and then I just need to decide about what's important and what's not, and delete and get rid of what's not. So yeah, like my little girl is really important to me. And then in a non-COVID world, just seeing the world is really important to me as well.
Yeah, that's lovely. Really, really, really beautifully put. So I suppose the final question we always ask is, does the hunter make the unicorn?
Well, the irony of that is Instabase was $1 billion company before it had a sales team.
So should we we'll just bin the whole series?
Just forget it, guys. Just
we'll name it something else then.
Yeah, sorry. It's sort of, this company has broken your entire mold. Yeah. Look, because as John said, there are the occasional company like Instabase where the technology is so monumental and the market is so huge where the investors see it, right? And then people are desperate to put money into it because they know how big it can be. But to grow a company to, beyond $1 billion, it's impossible to do without hunters. Impossible. Yep.
Great. So I suppose as a way of a kind of a conclusion, just kind of thinking back of everything that we've covered. So obviously our first series was a 33 CxOs. In this series, we're looking at the kind of the evolution and the further iterations. Obviously, John McMahon passed his teachings on to Jeremy, who's obviously now passed that on to you, and really kind of inspired the next wave. And we can already see how that playbook, the evolution of that playbook is evolving and becoming and molding. And now you're obviously addressing some very key issues around kind of diversity. And I think that's the kind of evolution which is a kind of allowing that to really take place. But just going back and reflecting, we've spoken a lot about the ICE criteria, hiring against intelligence, character, coachability, and then the last is actually experience. And I think that's a really key component to allow this evolution to happen. And I think there are some misconceptions. I think that when people look at that criteria, they probably look for privilege. They probably look for, people that are, they've just had it easy their whole life and made it to the top because that's what the cream does. And it's because they've come from a place of privilege. But actually, I think what's really touching about your story in particular, Luke, is the fact that you've come from the opposite. You've come from what must have been real hardship, a lot of difficulty, being the man of the house, and almost probably spending a lot of your life looking for yourself. And it wasn't until you got to AppD where you probably found yourself. And I think that was the trigger. There's obviously a huge amount of potential, and the ICE criteria is designed to enable and trigger that potential. And I think we've seen the full effect of just how powerful that can be when it really works. Because if we were to look at you as a kind of as a kind of model case of what can actually happen in the career and how it can pan out, it's your maniacal obsession with being the very best you can, mastery, being, really believing in your process. A, B, C, D, E, F will get you the success. And I'm going to just focus on having that success. And that's really been a perpetual kind of journey, which has propelled you to this moment where at 33, you're at the brink of probably becoming sky's the limit, but sales leader at probably one of the most exciting, dynamic, disruptive companies the world has ever seen. And I just think it's been an absolutely fantastic interview. And really, thank you so much for taking the time to share it. And I'm sure that our listeners are going to take a lot from it.
I really enjoyed it, guys. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share the story.
Hey, thanks ever so much for your time, Luke. Absolutely fascinating story. And as Simon said, I think our listeners are going to be absolutely blown away by some of the stories. And I think, I don't normally do this, but I'm going to put a bit of an add and an additional onto that conclusion, which is, I think, where is the next part of your journey, Luke? I think where we're going to really see the true magic is where you take what you've learned at such a young age and now develop it into, and you are doing it now, developing it into your own idea and taking that second layer. I think we could even be looking at the next John McMahon. So there we go. So and look, as I said, and that's spoken from from the heart as well. So Luke, really is absolute honor and pleasure to have you on the show, and thank you so much for your time again.
Far too kind, guys. Thank you.